Good evening, everyone. My name is Lurie I'm with Republican Liberty Caucus. We're an organization that is policy-driven on free markets, limited government, and also personal responsibility. We encourage all of you to come out to these events, participate. It's particularly important to get younger folks involved, and that's why I think that work with Houston Young Republicans, Washington AFB Republicans is such a great venue. So thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Louis and Leslie. So, who here has heard of a little group called the Houston Young Republicans? I think there might be a few members scattered around. So we are, I'm just going to say it, I think we're the most active young Republican group in the state. And this is our, what, 4th or 5th event this year, and it's just early February. So, and look at this turnout. So I'm really happy with everything that they've done. You know, I'm just the president. I let everyone else do the work for me. They've done all the hard work. Speaking of doing the hard work, we have Joe Pilati with the Washington Avenue Republicans, and we have HYR member of the year 2017, Ms. Ashley Sabota, sharing the timekeeping duties. So let's give them a round of applause. And I think that's about all I'm supposed to cover. So we're going to get things started, and hopefully we can move along pretty quickly. Our first speaker, we're going to begin with candidate introductions, and so I believe we just drew randomly, and Rick Walker, no? Oh, Jon Spiers, I'm sorry, Spiers.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to join you tonight. I'm Dr. Jon Spiers, and if you haven't guessed, I'm running to represent the 2nd Congressional District. As a heart surgeon, as a father, as a healthcare attorney, as a patriot, as someone who, just like you, loves his country, I feel compelled to step up when our nation calls and asks for help solving its problems. I feel compelled to solve this. I meet challenges head on, and we have some significant challenges to meet. I'm running for Congress because I believe we should repeal and replace Obamacare. And I believe that a leader from Houston, Texas, medical center should lead that charge. I believe we need to secure our borders. We need meaningful immigration reform. I believe mothers and fathers should be comfortable that their sons and daughters have a promising future, and our seniors should know that our nation will honor their commitment to them. I'm Jon Spiers. I want to represent Congressional District 2.
Hi, I'm Rick Walker. Grew up down in South Texas, at the age of 18. I started my first business with the last $1,000 my mom entrusted to me. I grew it up within the decade. It's a multi-million-dollar organization, creating hundreds of jobs. Simultaneous to that, in my late 20s, I took leadership over a global organization, eventually becoming chairman. Under my leadership, I scaled that global organization from a few hundred employees to over 2,000 team members operating in 50 countries like Pakistan, Russia, China, India, and Mexico. I know how to lead, and I appreciate your vote on March 6th. I welcome my 3 little girls, Emerson, Lily Kate, and Charlotte Rose. They're the reason why we're running. They're the reason why we're going to bring change and bring progress and bring exceptionalism back to Washington, D.C. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is David Balat. I'm a Houstonian. I was born and raised here. My parents immigrated to this country from Israel, and they did so legally. I had a front row seat to the American dream, and I had the great privilege of being able to have my own version of that dream and learning from them and the education that I received going to University of Houston. I became a healthcare executive and a hospital CEO. I'd go into hospitals that are financially distressed on the verge of bankruptcy, and I'd get them turned around. In this district, I've saved hundreds of jobs, and when we got them healthy, we created hundreds more. We've done a lot in the district, and we've also done things at the community level to make healthcare more affordable, working with the providers and the physicians. I'm the only one of these candidates here tonight that has a plan that's going to make healthcare affordable again. We've got to get government out of that business. My name is David Balat. I want to be your representative. I'd have no interest in being called congressman and going to D.C. for that purpose. I want to represent the people of CD2. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to be here with you. As I travel around the district, I've been talking to people, and they keep telling me they're frustrated with Washington. Well, I'm frustrated too, and that's why I'm running for Congress, to take Texas values to D.C. and get D.C. out of Texas. My first priorities in D.C. will be to downsize the federal government, get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'll cut that red tape and those hindrances on businesses so they can flourish and so they can build jobs. And I'll repeal Obamacare and be tough on border security. And I'll work to fix the infrastructure that was damaged by Hurricane Harvey and ruined our homes and our businesses. I'm Kathaleen Wall. I'm a conservative, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-gun, and I'm pro-business. For more information, go to KathaleenWall.com. And I'll never forget the people I serve in Texas. Thank you. I've got a previous appointment.
That's a hard act to follow. I hope that didn't count against my time. So my name is Malcolm Whittaker, and I'm an Eagle Scout and a patent lawyer. And I live here in the 2nd District with my wife and 2 daughters in the medical center area. So I've represented all types of businesses, from startups to multinational corporations. I've also been on the board of directors of large privately held corporations with operations around the world. So I know what creates jobs, and I know what makes the economy prosperous. Now, as a fiscal conservative, I see that we're on the wrong track, and we need to do something to bring down our federal spending. Last year, the federal deficit was $509 billion, and our total national debt was in excess of $20 trillion with a T. I'm the only candidate who has specific suggestions. That went by quicker than I thought. So I'm Malcolm Whittaker, and I'll try and work that into the rest of my talk. Malcolm Whittaker, thank you.
Hi folks, my name's Jonny Havens, and I'm running to make character count again in Congress. I'm tired of the broken promises coming from Congress. Promises like repealing Obamacare. Promises like securing our border. Promises like serving honorably. So if you elect me in 2 years, we'll be talking about promises kept, not promises broken. A little bit about me. I grew up here in Houston. I went to Texas A&M University. Woo! There you go. Graduated a day later, was commissioned into the U.S. Army, and about a week later, married my high school sweetheart, Anna, who's here. We've been married 12 amazing years. Went in the U.S. Army, deployed twice to Iraq as a U.S. Army Ranger Qualified Infantry Officer. There you go. We graduated from Duke Law School, came back here, worked at Baker Botts, a historic law firm downtown, where I represent energy companies all up and down. So, talk more. Thank you very much. Jonny Havens for Congress.
My name's Dan Crenshaw. I'm running to be your representative in the 2nd District. I'm running because I think we need leaders who've been tested, who have the right qualifications and education. My first test was in Katy, Texas. I lost my mother when I was just 10 years old to breast cancer. She taught me everything I know about Texas values: respect, hard work, never quit, and have integrity in everything you do. My second test was during my 10-year career as a U.S. Navy SEAL. I did 5 deployments. On my 3rd deployment, I was nearly killed and blinded by an IED blast. And through my faith and my Texas values and my wife, we made it through. And I didn't quit. I deployed twice more. When I had to be retired in 2016, I knew that I had to keep serving the American people. And I knew I had to get the tools to do it. So I went to the Harvard Kennedy School of Government so I could learn and understand common sense policy and good governance. You see, I took an oath to defend the Constitution. And that's what I'm going to do for you. I will never quit on you. I will never quit on Texas. Dan Crenshaw for Congress. Thank you.
He's also a hard act to follow, isn't he? And I'm glad Dan's going to stick around for the rest of the night, too. Thank you, Dan. My name is Justin Lurie. I am a businessman running for Congress. We are a pro-growth, pro-business, and anti-regulation campaign. Is spending equal with prosperity? We'd all already be rich, but we know it does not. Washington does not create prosperity. Instead, it can create the environment where individuals, where people, where businesses can be successful. And that's what I'll do. I will go to Washington and I will create that environment so everybody can be successful. Now let me tell you who I am. I'm the founding and lead partner at an investment bank. I'm very proud to serve on the American Petroleum Institute, the API Board of Directors. We need oil and gas representation in Washington. Oil and gas is Texas's #1 industry. It is Houston's #1 industry, and I will represent you. My name is Justin Lurie, and I'm running for Congress.
Okay, thank you all for participating. Great introductions. Now, if you're all wondering what that little white light over there means, that's actually your 30-second cue. So, here are the rules of the debate, and so everyone knows, the candidates all have a set of questions, one based on conservatism, and the other set of questions based on congressional powers. 5 minutes to respond to the first set of questions, and you'll have 30 seconds from the time you see the light, and when the bell rings, we know your time's up. Any questions? Great, excellent.
All right, thank you. So the first part is around something near and dear to all of us, conservatism. A conservative congressman knows their main objective is to conserve our liberty, the Constitution, and the U.S. of A. These duties are highly valued by CD2 citizens. Each candidate has 5 minutes. The first question, and the candidates can answer all or none of these questions in any way they want and prioritize them accordingly. The first is congressional conservatism. Ted Poe worked very closely with the Freedom Caucus. If elected, will you work closely with or join the Freedom Caucus?
Second item, healthcare. What is making healthcare so expensive, and what are you going to do about it?
Third question, border security immigration. Would you vote for the Daca Dreamers legalization if it included the border wall with increased security, the restriction of chain migration, and the end of the lottery immigration system?
Final question, controlled substances. The Texas GOP platform supports a physician's ability to prescribe cannabinoids for medicinal use. Yet existing federal law jeopardizes the license of any physician offering patients cannabis treatment. Would you support downgrading its classification from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule II drug, thus allowing physicians to treat their patients?
Everybody knows that 5 minutes is not nearly enough time to talk about all these topics, much less any one of them individually. As far as the first question regarding the Freedom Caucus, and Ted Poe is obviously a member, I would absolutely join that group. In fact, I've met with Justin Amash when I was in D.C. I've spoken with Mark Meadows, Chief of Staff, and I'm very much in communications with that group. I'd love to be a part of what they stand for. They defend our liberty, and right now they're in a fight regarding this spending budget. Regardless of the outcome of this race, I'll continue to work with them to see if I can implement my plan with that group and have it spread throughout Congress. As I said, I'm a healthcare executive and hospital CEO. Healthcare is in my blood. It's where I've lived. It's what I do, and we're implementing change at the local level here in the community to make it more affordable for people at all levels, whether you have the money or not. It should not be as expensive, and the reason that it is, that's the first question in healthcare. Why is healthcare expensive? I wish I had 30 minutes just to outline it for you. There are regulations in place that contribute to the cost of healthcare. Government must get out of the business of healthcare. It is not part of their enumerated powers. It's outside of the scope of Congress. They need to be out first and foremost, which means we need to repeal Obamacare. Branch and root. Did they do it? No. And it's an outright shame. But it's even before Obamacare, prior to Obamacare, we saw many, many regulations that caused healthcare to be hard. And the Democrats thought that Obamacare was the fix to the brokenness of healthcare. Well, they broke it further, unfortunately. But why is it expensive? The McCarran-Ferguson Act, the HMO Act of 1973. And in fact, if you see a lot of the entitlements that came into being in 1965, that's when you see the exponential curve come into play. But what's happened when you have a lot of regulations, you tend to have corporatism. You have big companies come into play. When you have bigger companies, smaller companies can't compete, so competition is decreased. We all know our economics. What happens when competition decreases? Costs go up. That's exactly right. So that's why costs have gone up. It's basic economics, and we've taken healthcare out of the hands of those people that deliver it. And I have a plan on my website called Freedom Care, if you go to davidbalat.com. And we need to eliminate a lot of these regulations. We need to increase competition among the insurance market. We need to be able to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies. The Medicare Optimization Act that was a part of Medicare Part D, that was an entitlement put into place during the Bush administration, prevents us from being able to negotiate for our own drugs. That's an outright crime. Tax reform, tort reform. The list goes on. There's so much that can be done, but we don't have the political will in D.C. to get it done. And that's why I ask for your support and your vote to have somebody to go up to repeal it. And if we can't do that, dismantle it from the inside out. And forgive me, I'm going to reference the list. Border security and immigration. That's also a very special topic for me. As I said in my introduction, my parents immigrated here legally. I watched my mom learn English. We learned English together on Sesame Street. Thank you. It's publicly funded. And my dad was deaf and mute. He had a disability. He worked his tail off. He loved American history. The thing that I saw about that process that they went through is that they became Americans. They love this country. They support our military. And they bred that into my brother and I. That's what we need to do with people who want to be a part of our culture and a part of our country. Now, would I vote for a Daca in support of eliminating the lottery and building the wall and getting rid of chain migration, which all three of those things should be done? I can't say that I would. And let me tell you why. DACA was an illegal executive order. It shouldn't have been passed in the first place, and it should have been fought by our Congress. The other thing is it's unconstitutional, I believe, for us to support an amnesty of those recipients. Why is that the case? If you look at those enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8, Congress has the obligation of creating a uniform rule of naturalization. That's all they're given. If we have an exception, that's not part of a uniform rule, is it? It's inconsistent with the consistency they're supposed to bring into this country. So I can't be a part of something that's unconstitutional. I believe in the rule of law. And I think people are too willing to make exceptions here and there. And we need to get back to where it makes sense and we are protective of those things that make us uniquely American, that makes us such an exceptional country. Is that the end of my time? Thank you all so much.
we put in the
We're working on
questions up?
getting those up.
You want me to wait?
Technical snafu, no, unless you have to.
I don't have to. Yeah, we got questions. Yeah. Okay, well, that's load or no. I'll review the question again. First one, about the Freedom Caucus. I'll give you a quote. Who remembers when somebody said, they vote no on the 10 Commandments? Quick trivia, who said that? Ted Poe, and that's when he left the Freedom Caucus. Now, what has changed since he left in March? I'm not sure. Maybe Mark Meadows, he says he has a good working relationship with President Trump. I take him at his word. I believe Trump when he says it too. So I don't know if I join. I want to have a little more input from the people in Washington. I mean, Ted left for a reason. I do agree with their idealism. Oh, we're almost there, huh? All right, here we go. Yeah, there it is. See, Ted Poe worked very closely, but he left. So I'm going to leave that one up for, I'm not sure, right? We'll see what happens in a year, because things change pretty often. All right, question 2, healthcare. What I like about this is David and I have a little bit of conflicting views. We've been going back and forth for months, and I think it's all in good fun. I think it's great that we go back and forth here. All right, so my view, I'll be really, really straight. The problem is there's no competition in healthcare. There's no transparency. If you want to go to the doctor and you want to get your hand, let's say you need surgery, well, there's no way you know the pricing, that all-in pricing between provider A and provider B. There are doctors out there who post full information, what will it cost from A to B, aftercare, drugs, everything. But for 99.9% of the providers out there, they do not provide that information. You do not know what anything costs, so that bill comes in the mail. That does not work. With no competition, well, I said that wrong, but with no transparency, there is no competition. That's the problem. And we have competition, what happens? Prices go down, quality goes up. And how about this one? Let's say we have the airline pilots in front of us. Now on a plane, in seat 14A, they may pay X dollars for that one trip. And in 14B, it's a different price. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's dynamic pricing. But I don't think your health care should be priced that way. How come if you have insurance company ABC, the doctor charges you a different price than if you had insurance company, 1, 2, 3, or you're paying cash? What if you went to a restaurant and you ordered a burger and you paid $6.99, but the guy over here, he ordered the same burger, but he's being charged $11.99? How would that guy feel? Same service, same everything. Why is cash paying so much more? Let's fix these things, and then we can fix our healthcare system. We need real competition. And this will cost the government how much? Nothing. Obama tried and we spent so much money because his idea, let's put more money into healthcare. No. Opposite. Bring transparency in. That will fix the problem. All right, third question. Let's see. Okay. Daca Dreamers. I resent that you wrote Dreamers up there. I have dreams. My kids have dreams. All of you have dreams. Right? That is not a dreamer. I don't know who wrote it, but I will take exception. So when we talk about would I vote for it, well, first, my first vote is say, hey, Mitch McConnell, let's eliminate that 60-vote rule and go back to majority rules in the Senate. We control all 3 chambers. Let's act like it. Let's go back to that 51-vote rule, or maybe even 50, and then Vice President Pence can make that tie break. Then we do not need to have the DACA Dreamer provision. So until you change that, my vote is no. But if Mitch McConnell will not change these rules, and this is the best thing we can get done, I will vote yes. And I will vote yes for one reason, because that is so much better than the status quo. Right now we have no wall. Right now we have chain migration. Right now we have no merit system. That's awful. So if I can fix that, and all I have to do is let the DACA go through, not the Dreamers, but the DACA, I can live with that. But I really want to happen is Mitch McConnell to change that rule. How much time do we have? I'm going to leave on a high note then. Thank you all. Kathaleen's not here, so we're going to skip her.
So maybe we should have divided up Ms. Wall's time, but I guess we're not going to do that. So let me work in almost reverse order here. My sister died from pancreatic cancer, and the doctor risked his license to be able to prescribe medical marijuana for her. So I'm not going to give you his name because I don't want to get him in trouble, but I look at that and I say a doctor should not have to put their license at risk to alleviate a patient's suffering. That makes no sense to me. So if I was in Washington, I would vote to do that. Now, let's continue in the same vein on health care. So the reason why health care, I think the question is why is health care so expensive and what are you going to do about it? So the answer is, and it's some of what Mr. Balat said, the government's involved in it too much. There's no competition, right? If the government were to get out of the way, there could be significant price competition and prices could come down. But I'll give you a very good example of this, and that segues nicely into my third point. So in 2003, when the drug benefit for seniors was passed, I don't know if anybody remembers that, but there was a provision put in that bill that said the government will never seek a volume discount on prescription drugs for seniors. That's costing all of us here $40 billion a year. That's been going on for 15 years, so we've spent $600 billion we didn't need to spend. So let's get the government out of health care, and let's let the states decide that. And then the fourth question was Mr. Ho and the Freedom Caucus. I would work with the Freedom Caucus, and I didn't actually get to this in my introduction, but we ran a deficit last year of $509 billion. We are in excess of $20 trillion in debt. This is a national security crisis for the United States. If we can't borrow money, the last time that we had this level of debt as a percentage of the economy was 1946, when we finished winning World War II. This is a national security crisis for us. We have to be able to borrow money to run. If we have a crisis, if we get into a war with China, if we get into a war in Iran, we've got to be able to borrow money. And we're not going to be able to do that with a $20 trillion national debt. As I was driving over here, Mo Brooks, a very conservative congressman, was on the radio, and he said, this is unsustainable. We, talking about the United States, our country, are going to go broke. And this is a Republican congressman from Alabama, a very conservative person. We are going to go broke, and our fellow members of Congress are debt junkies. Those are the words he used, debt junkies. So we've got to go there. Somebody's got to go there and do that. And I would probably join the Freedom Caucus, but I would also join the Republican Study Group, which has 154 members and a lot bigger voice, because they focus more on debt reduction and spending reduction. And if you go to my website, www.notagovernmentman.com, you'll see my suggestions for reducing that. And I'm actually have a competition for the best suggestion, how to reduce government spending. And the prize, the monthly prize, which I just awarded to a guy named Randy Beals, he said he might be here tonight, but I guess he's not. Our monthly prize is a Ruger AR-556 semi-automatic rifle. So Mr. Beals won that this morning. The committee finally got back to me and told me who the winner was. So I'm Malcolm Whittaker, and it's www.notagovernmentman.com. Thank you.
Again, my name's Jonny Havens. My name's Jonny Havens. No worries. Trying to silence me. No. My name's Jonny Havens. I'm a proud conservative, have been all my life. To the first question, I would work closely with the Freedom Caucus. They're a very conservative group of congressmen and very, very happy with their policies. I will say, however, that my first duty is to this district. And if there's ever a time that the Freedom Caucus takes a position that's opposite of something I've promised this district, that I vote with the district, not the Freedom Caucus. I think that's very important, and I think that's something that Judge Poe realized while he was up there and why he ultimately left the Freedom Caucus. The second issue, healthcare. Healthcare is expensive, 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 and it's for one reason: the government. You have to get the government out of healthcare. You need to get them out so you can increase competition and you can lower costs. That's how you do it. So there's a couple different specific ways to do that, okay, to get the government out. Number one is the government sort of set up a system inadvertently where employers pay a portion of your healthcare costs for many people, not all, but for many. I think it would be better if the employer gave you that money as compensation. So your compensation goes up, and then you, each one of you out there, you decide what health care you want. You don't get the baked 2 or 3 choices from your employer. You get to go out in the market, compare costs, and decide what's best for you. So I think that's one way that we create a true market. We have millions of consumers out there that have increased pay that can go out and choose the plan that's best for them. The next point is we need to increase and reform health savings accounts. With all this money you get from your employer now in this plan, it goes in the health savings account, it's tax advantaged. Now you go out, you find the premiums that are right for you, you find the plan that's right for you, and you find the providers that are right for you. And you can do this because we're going to increase price transparency, like Mr. Lauria said. You need to know what the prices are so you can be an informed consumer and make choices. And that's where the power of the market will come. That's where the competition will come. You've got the power as a consumer because you are making the choice, not your employer, not the benefits manager at your employer, but you. You make that choice, you use your money in your tax advantage account, and you go out there and you buy the health care that's right for you and your family. And then we lower the cost of care because we get smart about it. I was in the Army. A battalion of 700 soldiers had a physician assistant, which is a 4-year bachelor's degree, provide the vast majority of health care. And that's a great way to lower costs. All the, scratches, bruises, colds, all that can be done at much lower cost. And it's because of a lot of regulation getting in the way that we have to go to doctors who study for many, many years, and they have great value, but they have great value for other issues, not just the scrapes and bruises. So that's another way where we can lower costs and we can create competition to get in there. Allowing insurance to be sold across state lines will be another way to increase competition and let us have more choice. So those are some of the things we can do, and it's all about getting the government out of healthcare and empowering you, the consumer. If we do that, we can beat the cost in healthcare and we can have a functioning healthcare market. Border security. Huge, huge, huge issue. So how do we deal with it? I do not want to support Daca and the border security as it is. However, like Mr. Lauria, I agree. The status quo has got to change. So if that's the best deal we can get, if we get the border security, if we in-chain migration and have merit-based immigration, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. It's an imperfect deal, but that is something that gets us many goals and really advances the ball from 30 years of just kind of uncontrolled immigration. So it's not a perfect deal. However, that $25 billion we're talking about spending on the wall in immigration, and the $25 billion it's going to cost us over 10 years to do DACA, that should be offset. That spending should be offset somewhere. There should be cuts for that. So we need to work on that. Controlled substances. Yes, I support moving it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 drug. Again, it's getting people the option to get the health care they want. It's common sense way to do things. So again, my name is Jonny Havens. Happy to talk more. Thank you so much.
So the main topic here is conservatism. So I cannot help but want to give you the vision for the future of the conservative movement first. And I am going to answer those questions. Put simply, our party is the party of freedom and good governance, and we're the guardians of American identity. That wasn't always just a conservative value, but it's recently been pushed aside by the left and their divisive identity politics and their notions of false compassion and an ever greater growing governance say in how you live your life. The greatest threat proposed by the left is the undercutting of our values and our traditions and our history. This idea that America is inherently flawed. Well, I disagree with that. And as conservatives, we have to provide a better vision, one grounded in optimism and freedom and the right policies, better health care, a secure border, better education system that focuses on vocational training and apprenticeships, and securing our debt and the main drivers of that debt. And I also said we're the guardians of the American identity. What does that mean? Well, put simply, it's freedom, patriotism, it's saluting the red, white, and blue with God in our hearts. And as conservatives, we have to defend those core beliefs. See, this idea that America is just some place disconnected by a common heritage or history, it's not true. It's an identity. And it's an identity that is rooted in a story that began in 1776 and became the ideals that we know and love today. And conservatives are the champions of those values. We're defenders of freedom. And we are a vision for the future. And part of that is the right policy. So let's talk about healthcare and why that's so expensive. First and foremost, doctors aren't in charge anymore. Doctors have to be in charge of your care, not a faceless bureaucrat, not an insurance company. We have to move to a system where we can lower premiums, and if we have higher deductibles, we can rely on health savings accounts to fix that. And move to a subscription-based service with your primary care doctor so that they can interact with you for a cheap price and get you the care that you need. It's also expensive because in this country, we don't do preventive medicine well. We need to repeal the ACA and put power back in the hands of doctors so that we can engage in preventive medicine. Another thing, we need to give the right tools to our first responders. In the early 2000s, the Navy SEAL teams pioneered something called Tactical Combat Casualty Care. If you remember one thing from that, stop the bleeding. Put a tourniquet on it, walk it off, drink some water. Did you know that those lessons from the military that are beaten into my head are not common knowledge among first responders? 20% of trauma victims in the U.S., the deaths are preventable. If you're under 50, the number one cause of death is trauma. Because not all our first responders get tourniquets and the right training. That's unacceptable. That's driving healthcare costs up. Prescription drugs. That's driving healthcare costs up. Medicare Part D can't negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies. We have to change that. We have to make that more competitive. Our ERs are overrun by illegal immigrants. That's driving up costs. And that brings me to the next question, which is DACA. So, hey, if we get everything we want, we get that border wall, we get border security, we end chain migration, we begin with a migration system that starts with economic needs, merit-based, no more anchor baby laws. When we get all these things, we can talk about a legal status for the dreamers, not a path to citizenship. They have to get in line just like every other legal immigrant. I will not do that injustice to legal immigrants like my stepmother who did it the right way, or like your parents who did it the right way. You do not cut them in the back of the line. The last question. What's that one? Controlled substances. Again, this all fits together. Put the care back in the hands of the doctors. I will never support recreational use of marijuana, but we can have a conversation about medical use for marijuana and putting the power back in the hands of the doctors. I think that's what we really have to remember because we can trust them. How much time do I have left? I could keep talking.
Go ahead.
Oh, the Freedom Caucus. Oh, yes, thank you. Freedom Caucus. Ted Poe left the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus exists for a good reason, and that's to keep Republicans accountable to their conservative values. However, my real loyalty is to the people of the 2nd District, no one else. I will not promise my vote away ahead of time for some hypothetical legislation. My loyalty is to you. I will never quit on Texas. Dan Crenshaw for Congress. Thank you.
I'm a doctor, so I want to start a little bit out of order. I want to address the controlled substance question first, because you're right. Doctors can lose their license for prescribing medical marijuana. But there's more to the controlled substance debate. There's also the entire opioid crisis that faces our nation. Let's start with that. 65,000 people died from drug overdoses last year. 65,000 people died needlessly. But let's go back to 1980, when one letter with 5 sentences to the New England Journal changed history. That letter postulated that narcotics were not nearly as addictive as we thought. Move forward in time. Suddenly, pharmaceutical companies are developing really potent narcotics, opioids. And they tell us that they're not addictive because, hey, look, there was this letter a few years back saying it's okay to use drugs. People won't get addicted. Direct-to-consumer marketing took off, and suddenly you're barraged with mailers and television commercials saying your drugs are not going to addict you, and no one should have pain. Ask your doctor about this drug. Doctors were sanctioned for not prescribing drugs. The bottom line, we created a monster. We must address this. Our first responders must be given the tools that they need. They must be given naloxone, Narcan, a drug that can reverse the effects of opioids. But Narcan does not need to have a 9,000% increase associated with it once everyone realizes, hey, this is a great drug. So we're in a crisis, and we must address that. Our FDA is stressed and taxed and doing the very best they can. But they're burdened by many other regulations, which brings us to the second part, medical use of marijuana. Gentlemen are right. As a doctor, I could lose my drug enforcement agency certificate to prescribe controlled substances. Where do I suggest someone use marijuana? I can't write that prescription. People like marijuana because they think it induces euphoria. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, makes you high. That's its effect. It does not do anything else. That's why a lot of people like to smoke it. But I look at science and I look at hard data. And the facts show that there are some other substances in there, like cannabidiol, which can be extracted and converted into an oil that may be useful in treating some neurologic diseases, epilepsy, other things. We need to address this. I believe that the laws already in place would allow the Food and Drug Administration to reschedule medical extracts of marijuana, like cannabidiol, and we should. But until we do that, our doctors' hands are tied. Let's move up the list. Border security and immigration. I got a call yesterday from a father. Just thinking about it upsets me. His son was 21 years old, sitting at an intersection, and an illegal immigrant who had been deported 4 times pulled up beside him and shot him in the face. I have children. No parent should ever have to go through that. No parent should ever have to bury their child. We must secure our borders. We must reform our immigration policy. Daca is not a dream. It is a nightmare. If they want to stay in the United States, they must do so legally. The men and women before us, our ancestors, followed the rules. There's no reason they can't. I'm sorry that they find themselves in this position. As a Republican, I can be compassionate. I understand that. I empathize with them. But that's the rule. That's what we must do. I have left myself, a surgeon who believes and is passionate about health care, less than 30 seconds to talk about the centerpiece of my platform. Let me hit a few points. Our drug cost, we spend too much money on our medications. We underwrite the healthcare system for the rest of the world. The reason these other nations have universal health care is you and I pay their bill when we send our check to the pharmaceutical companies. That must stop. We must reform our healthcare system. I'd love to talk about that all night, so please talk to me afterwards. Thank you. Jon Spiers.
Again, I'm Rick Walker. It's great to be with you tonight. You know, this is the most important event of the whole political season. You're here. Thank you for being here. Clap for yourself. Go ahead. Now, let me make a follow-up comment to that. If a candidate isn't willing to be here to fight for themselves, what makes you think they're going to fight for you in Washington, D.C.? We're not going to stand by and let people try to buy this election. Each man in front of you is a better candidate than the weaklings that aren't here in front of you. As I discussed before, in my 20s, I created hundreds of jobs. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house. My dad was out of work most of our childhood. My mom worked double jobs. We didn't start with much. We picked ourselves up, pulled ourselves up by bootstraps and got here. 20s took over a global organization leadership, eventually became chairman. Scaled it up to over 2,000 staff working in 50 countries. I'll serve on the board of directors of the National Christian Foundation here in Houston. We deploy between $50 and $100 million a year to nonprofits and churches here in the area. I also serve on the board of directors of the largest seminary in the Middle East, doing ideological warfare throughout the Middle East. I understand the world. I understand the way the world works. I understand leading and making advances in complex global organizations. For those of you who are faith-minded, under my leadership, these organizations have planted in excess of 50,000 churches around the world. In fact, I've created more churches through my leadership in these organizations than everyone who's ever served in the history of Congress combined. If you want a candidate who's accomplished, if you want a candidate who's qualified, here I am. If you want a candidate that's unemployed, that's been drinking beer, eating corn nuts, and watching Fox News or reading Breitbart their entire lives, but have really clear policy stances, I'm not your candidate. They're not here. I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe that I'm going to do whatever it takes to make the world better for my 3 little girls 20 and 30 years from now, not make the world better for me to get reelected in 2 years. I don't give a rip about being reelected in 2 years. I care about my kids, and you can trust me that if I care about my kids, I'm going to care about your kids and your grandkids too. We're in this thing together. Now let's talk about the policy issues. Let's talk about number one. Let's talk about Ted Poe. I have a general rule. It's called the Ted rule. If Ted Poe did something, I'm going to assume it's right until it's proven not right. Ted walked away from the Freedom Caucus because these guys cannot negotiate. Now, I'm going to vote in line with the Freedom Caucus probably 95% of the time. They cannot negotiate. It is because of the Freedom Caucus why we still have the employer mandate. The Freedom Caucus single-handedly cost us hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of American jobs because they kept moving the goal line, in Ted's own words. Excuse me, Judge Poe's own words. They kept moving the goal line. They don't know how to negotiate. Again, I'm going to vote in line with them probably 95% of the time. They're right 95% of the time. But in this instance, they cost the American small business person and American taxpayers hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of jobs by leaving the employer mandate in the bill. And that's a shame. Number 2, health care. There's no competition. Number 3. There's doctors up here. You don't want to hear about healthcare from me. Yeah, you can clap for that. It's okay. It's okay. Let's talk about border security. Let's talk about the Daca Dreamers. So the Daca Dreamers. So we're talking about the 800,000 Mitch McConnell talks about. We're talking about the 2.7 million Dreamers. Let's say we're talking about Daca. Increased security, the restriction of chain migration, the wall, the ending of the lottery immigration system, all really great things, all things I'd love to have happen. There's a critical element missing here. It leaves the carrot in place. They're coming here for the money. They're coming here for the economic situation. If we do not harden I-9 and make E-Verify mandatory, they're going to keep coming here. You can build a 1,000-foot wall. They're going to keep coming here because this is where the money is. That's right. That's right. As a small business person who's created more jobs than all of the candidates combined, because that's been my business, entrepreneurs. E-Verify is smart business. It's smart to know who's working for you. It's smart to know that if you have 3 Juan Valdez's with the exact same social security number, hey, maybe there's something wrong with that. We're going to stop that. I demand a secure country, secure borders, and a secure future for my 3 little girls, and I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. to fight for you. I'm going to fight for myself now, and I'm going to fight for you in Washington, D.C. Thanks a lot.
Okay, great first section. How about a round of applause for conservatism? From one candidate who was not able to be here from the start of we were planning this, we have a short video to play. This is Kevin Roberts. And then we'll transition to the part 2 issue section right afterwards.
Video, but not audio.
For taking the time to be here tonight. I was raised in Amarillo, Texas. The day after I was born, my father left for Army boot camp at Fort Hood, and I was reared by my grandparents. We didn't have a lot of material possessions, but I carry with me today 3 core values that they instilled: integrity, commitment, and hard work. It is because of those values that I began working at the age of 14 and saved money to put myself through Texas Tech University, where I received a degree in business and became the first person in my family to receive a college degree. I've spent over 30 years in business, taking small businesses and growing them nationwide and creating quality jobs. I want that same opportunity for our future generations, where individuals can dream a dream, and if they're willing to work hard, they can accomplish that. So I ran for the Texas House. I'm proud of my work this past legislative session. One of my bills that was signed into law by Governor Abbott eliminates unnecessary and burdensome regulations on small business and individuals. I co-sponsored and voted for bills that balance the budget without raising taxes, that eliminate anti-sanctuary cities in order to protect our families, that appropriated $800 million to secure our border and to add additional personnel because the federal government was failing us. I'm a strong pro-life advocate and voted and co-sponsored legislation to ban partial birth abortion and to defund Planned Parenthood. When I heard that Congressman Poe was retiring, I knew I had a duty to step forward and run for Congress. Our nation is at a time where we need proven conservative leadership. We need someone with legislative experience that can be a strong voice for our district and hit the ground running. We need someone who is currently involved in ensuring that our families impacted by Harvey receive the disaster assistance that they are due. There are 3 critical issues impacting the 2nd Congressional District that I would like to speak to you about tonight. First is flood mitigation. I don't have to wait till January 2019 to begin working on a flood mitigation plan. I'm involved with it now in working with local, state, and federal elected officials to move forward a flood mitigation plan that resolves many of the short-term issues that we know about, so our families do not have to experience the devastation that we experienced in Harvey. Economic growth. We've seen wonderful things already happen to families, to individuals, to businesses, thanks to President Trump's tax cut. We know in Texas that the Texas model works. Less regulation, less taxes, and a pro-growth philosophy leads to prospering of businesses and individuals and leads to opportunity. And finally, our national defense. We must secure our border. The state of Texas stepped in where the federal government failed us in providing the needed resources to secure our border, to keep the drug cartels, to keep the gangs out. We have a huge opioid epidemic, and one of the most critical ways to slow that down is by securing the border. We need to add additional personnel, and we need to add critical assets and technology to assist. And finally, our national defense. The Obama administration has obliterated our military readiness. We're sending our young men and women in harm's way with aged equipment. We're around 100,000 deficit in personnel that we need. The Navy is at its lowest level of personnel since 1917. That is unreasonable, and it has to change. My name's Kevin Roberts. I want to thank the organizers of tonight's event for giving me an opportunity to come to you remotely. I am a pro-life, limited government, fiscal conservative. I want to go to Congress and advance President Trump's agenda and make America great again. I would be honored to have your vote and your support in the March primary so that I can take the Texas model to Washington. Thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, candidates, we move on to the second part of our debate, well, forum actually. And the rules will be the same. You have 5 minutes to address the questions that were presented to you. When you see the light, that indicates you have 30 seconds. The ring indicates your time has elapsed. Congressional power. Congressmen are the link between the people and the powerful federal government. Congress must provide people's checks and balances necessary for a limited central government. First question. In light of the DOJ, NSA, and FBI's abuses of power to enable warrantless government surveillance of U.S. citizens, what should Congress do to protect Fourth Amendment rights of Americans?
Foreign affairs and military engagements. As of mid-2017, our armed forces have conducted military engagements in 14 countries, Asia, Mideast, and Africa, all under the authority of the Authorization of Use of Military Force from 2001. In your opinion, have current military engagements and deployments exceeded the executive authority of the 2001 AUMF, and should Congress challenge these executive actions?
Economy and financial markets. Since the financial crisis of 2008, quantitative easing has led to central banks around the world increasing their balance sheets by more than $8.3 trillion. Many economists are now warning of economic instability due to Congress's insatiable spending and the prolonged low interest rates. What should Congress do about the runaway spending, enormous national debt, and the Federal Reserve money supply surge?
Can I ask you to turn the clock around, Ashley? Oh, that's too small to see. I'll just have to look. All right. So I'm Malcolm Whittaker, just like I was last time. I'm going to go back to Daca because I didn't really address that. My parents came to the United States legally in the 1950s. So I understand what it means that you have to come here legally, and if you're not here legally, I am sympathetic to the idea that someone who was brought here as a child through no fault of their own, they ought to be allowed to seek a path to legality. But doing that ought to be something that if they're not otherwise entitled to be here, they shouldn't be here, just because you were brought here as a child. So I didn't address that just a moment ago. Government powers. It's interesting, government powers. So Mr. Poe has actually come up with a solution to this. In 2015, he introduced a bill, and that's why I brought my cheat sheet with me, H.R. 2233, the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. And what he said is the government can't just listen in on people's emails and phone calls unless they get a warrant. Now, unfortunately, that didn't go far in Congress, and I'm not sure why, but I hate to say Judge Poe already solved that problem, and if I went to Congress to represent the people of the 2nd District, I would reintroduce that bill. So, foreign affairs and military engagements. Now, it is a valid question to ask, why do we have 1,000 soldiers fighting in Niger, which is a country in West Africa? I don't think most members of Congress, you remember the 4 young men, 4 Green Berets were killed a few months ago. And they asked members of Congress, do you know that anybody's even there? And that most of them said, no, I was unaware of that. But I do believe that the authorization that was given after 2001 should be used. I think it's important to fight Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and I would sort of defer to the experts in the Department of Defense about that. So the economy and financial markets. Well, you heard me harp on about that a little bit before. Last year, our deficit was $509 billion, and we are $20 trillion in debt, with a T, and we are racing towards $21 trillion. This is a national security issue. We cannot continue to spend money like this. As an example, you know, if we can't borrow money, we couldn't have won World War II, right? But we've got to be able to borrow money. If we are up to our eyeballs in debt, we are at a historically high level of government borrowing. We have got to do something to bring this under control. And I pledge to have work with a member of my staff whose primary job, along with me, is to find ways to reduce government spending. I talked to you about the $40 billion that we're overspending on prescription drugs for seniors. If we were to say that new federal government employees didn't get a pension, that would save $20 billion a year. I'm not talking about taking it away from people who are already working for the government, but we've been talking for, 8 minutes now, maybe 9, and we've already saved $60 billion. I would propose to you that we can get to a solution to this, and that it is a reasonable thing to do. I would just close by saying that I'm not the guy who only wants to cut spending. We do need to have flood control, and I've talked at the other forums that I've been at about the coastal spine, which was proposed by Texas A&M. They worked with a bunch of Dutch engineers to say, next time there's a hurricane, how are we going to avoid having flooding? And there needs to be a way that we can improve the reservoirs and improve the controls of the reservoirs and the other bodies of water so we don't get the same problem we did. Now, that's going to cost $8 or $10 billion, but we need to come up with that money to protect Houston. So that is what needs to be done, and that's what I would do. So when I went to candidate school, they said, make sure to mention your name a lot, because that's the only thing that people will remember about you. So I am Malcolm Whittaker. My website is www.notagovernmentman.com, which I think reflects my attitude about government. And I hope that I will have your vote on March 6th for the 2nd Congressional District. Thank you so much, and thank you to the organizers.
Government powers. Our government has awesome powers, and we must trust our government not to abuse the powers. We have 3 branches of government that are designed to keep each other in check. But we know that those powers are often abused. It is embarrassing and frustrating. I want to talk to you about an abuse that I bet you didn't know. The 4th Amendment protects you against illegal search and seizure. Your electronic health records contain some of the most valuable information on the black market today. A hacker would much rather have your health care information than your credit card number. We have a vast store of your information that is accessed. That sort of breach is unacceptable. And let's examine one other little item. When we talk about the DOJ interfering and looking in your records, the FBI looking at your records, There's another three-letter agency that begins with I, ends with S, and has an R, smack dab in the middle. Why do they need to know what's going on in your medical care? There is no reason for that. That invasion has to stop. The next item, foreign affairs and military engagements. One of Congress's job is oversight. We need to have congressional oversight. A sound international policy, diplomacy, is best when it is backed by a mighty military. Now, we're very fortunate. We have the strongest, most powerful military on earth. We have two heroes up here who have proudly served. But we must practice sound judgment in our diplomacy, and we need congressional oversight. We don't need to have our men and women deployed around the world and our Congress not know. Now, it's true. There are threats everywhere, and we must prepare to face them. We're not the world's police force, but we should not back down from the challenges that threaten our country. Diplomacy is best when you're dealing with reasonable and rational people. But the last time I checked, there are a lot of folks in the world that are neither reasonable nor rational. They threaten us every day. We will always retaliate when we're attacked. But there's another principle that we should keep in mind, and that's the principle of self-defense, preemptive self-defense, which was immortalized after the War of 1812. It's called the Caroline Test. If we know that we're going to be attacked, we have the right to immediately and with overwhelming force protect our country. We can and should always be prepared to save American lives. Because today, a delay can lead to the death of thousands or even millions. Remember that little madman in the Hermit Kingdom? We need to give our military the power, but our Congress should exercise oversight. The economy and financial markets. I told you I was a doctor and I like to make healthcare a central part of my talk. This is where I kind of twist around and make a talk about the economy into a healthcare talk. Why can I do that and do it with a straight face? Because our economy, 20% of our gross domestic product, 20%, $3.3 trillion is healthcare. That is way too much. It is not sustainable. At the growth rate we're facing now, in 20 years, our seniors are going to spend half of their Social Security benefit to pay out-of-pocket health care expenses that are not covered by Medicare. That is a scary figure. If our nation does not rein in its health care spending, we're doomed. That is one of the most important ways we can address our budgetary problems. Think about our budget this way. If you're a median American family making $54,000 a year and you're the American government, you're spending $64,000. You're overspending. But what's even scarier is you already have $272,000 worth of debt. We must trim our budget, make common sense cuts, reform our healthcare system so that it does not bankrupt America. There will be hard decisions. We will have to make hard decisions. And as a surgeon, I have been comfortable making hard decisions. There are many times when I have had to deliver tough news, but the tough news has to be delivered. Our leaders need to make hard decisions, and I am ready to make those hard decisions for you. Because I always ask myself, am I doing what is best for the people of this nation, of this state, and for this congressional district? I'm Dr. Jon Spiers. I want to represent the 2nd Congressional District.
Hello again. All right, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to answer the questions. All right, so the first two questions kind of derive from each other. It came right after September 11th, 2001. The first one, we talk about the government powers, right, and the NSA and spying on you. That's when the Patriot Act. I don't know if you all remember the mood of the country September 12th, September 13th, September 14th. I can talk about the mood in New York City. I was one of the people who survived that day in Lower Manhattan that you may have saw on TV running for their life and that big cloud of smoke following me. So when President Bush said, hey, these are the powers that we need to keep you safe, I said, good, let's give it to them. But the problem is, it's been a number of years and technology keeps changing. And we've had whistleblowers from the NSA. Remember Project Prism? That's the one that said, hey, we're going to use Google, we're going to use Yahoo, and we're going to spy on you. I think we've gone a little bit too far. Now, what can we do about it? Right? How do we balance that between safety and privacy? I was going to quote Ben Franklin. He had a really good line about that, but I didn't write it down and I forgot it. But I bet all of you in this room know what it is.
You deserve neither.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Deserve neither. That was what I was looking for. Thank you. So there are some states who have taken this upon themselves. It's called the Fourth Amendment Protection Act, I believe it is. In states like Kansas and Arizona, what these rules do is it prevents the metadata from being collected in their states. We could try to help that. But really in Washington, and this is a real pity, because this is what happened just a couple weeks ago. The USA Rights Act. It was defeated just a couple weeks ago. And that act would have prevented the warrantless backdoor searching by the NSA. It would also eliminate the about search. Anybody know what that is? Anybody hear of it? Because it's scary. It used to be you could do a search, meaning the NSA, if an email or a phone call or a text, whatever, ask Peter Strzok, if it was to you or from you. The about search is a little bit different. The about search is bigger if it's about you. Think how big and global and far-reaching that is. It's too much. I think it's unconstitutional. So when that bill died in January 11th, I think it was, just a couple weeks ago, I think we all lose. I think it's too much. I think we need to have that right balance, but we need to have those protections. All right, the AUMF. If you read it really closely, it was passed September 14, 2001, but it was specific. If you read through those commas, it was specific for the countries who either committed or aided in the September 11th attacks. But since then, the AUMF has been used 37 times. It's a lot. It's from Eritrea to Afghanistan, from Kenya to Iraq, a whole list of countries. Now, I'm not making judgments on what the military actions are. I'm not saying that whatsoever. What I'm really talking about is oversight and expanding too much presidential powers. I think Obama grabbed a lot of power. I also think George W. Bush grabbed a lot of power. And I think Congress should be holding on to that power that they have, because that is the oversight. We need a checks and balance. That's the way our republic was designed, and that's the way they must operate if we want to keep it. So let's move right to the third question about the economy and the financial markets. Because I'm going to go back to the founders again. When Hamilton designed the Federal Reserve Bank, he made them individual, independent districts. And they had their own variable rates from district to district. But in 1933, and then again in 1935, we had the Federal Reserve Act. And that changed things. That made the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee. 30 seconds, right? Oh, I'm going to talk even faster. And what that did is it centralized to one interest rate, one piece of number, and the problem is that's a lot of power to one person. Would we be in the place we are now? We had competing districts. Would we be in the place where we are now if there wasn't so much power in one person? Remember Ben Bernanke? He was looked at like a god by 60 Minutes. Are you ringing me? I guess so. I can't hide. All right, I am Justin Lurie. I'm running for Congress.
My name's Dan Crenshaw, and I'm also going to answer these questions. This one's about the authority of Congress and taking back its role. Well, I'm an Article 1 constitutionalist. That's why I'm running for Congress. I believe we need to do that, take back our role, whether it's deregulation, actually overseeing some of the federal agencies that are unelected but still making regulations on a daily basis. How much money can we save with every page that we take out of federal acquisition process? A lot. You can actually pay for some of the deficit that we keep talking about. All right, let's talk about the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment came into being because America has a history with general warrants that we got from the British. We passed the Fourth Amendment because we had a very bad memory of the British passing warrants to be able to search your home just in case you were part of the rebellion. That's unacceptable. When the FISA courts came into being, that was the first step towards undermining the Fourth Amendment. Now, out of this whole group, I'm the only one with an active security clearance. I'm the only one who stood over the shoulder of my NSA analysts and actually looked at these things and see how we do business. You can rest assured that it's not as bad as you think, but there's been abuses. Because anytime you give the government too much power, you can assure that there might be abuses, and we saw that. When 99% of FISA warrants get approved, we're not so sure that there's a real process there with scrutiny. That's probably too much. When entire zip codes can be sucked into the database, it's probably too much. So what's Congress's role? Well, it's oversight. It's doing its job. It's doing its job. I mean, it's oversight. That's what we're here to do. And they're doing that. But we have to be more careful. We have to look at the secrecy of the FISA court and make sure that what we're seeing come in is actually what we want to happen with and the people we actually want to be watching. All right, foreign affairs and military engagements, the AUMF. The question really is, which no one's really answered, is did the president actually exceed these authorities? When you read the AUMF, not really. We didn't really exceed those authorities because it was extremely broad. What the AUMF said is go after the nations, but also individuals that perpetrated September 11th and prevent any further acts of terrorism. That's very broad. Now, is it outdated? Yeah, probably. I'm the only one with a lot of recent and relevant experience who knows what we're actually doing abroad with these authorizations. My last deployment in 2016 was to Korea. I understand behind the scenes what's going on with the North Koreans and what we need to do. Before that, it was working against the Iranians in the Persian Gulf. I'm the only one with the recent and relevant experience who understands these issues. Before that, it was fighting terrorism in Afghanistan against the Taliban. Before that, it was fighting Al-Qaeda in Iraq twice. I know what my special operations brothers are doing all over the world. I know what we're doing in Niger. What we're doing is we're propping up our allies so that they can take the fight to the enemy for us, so that we don't send our blood and treasure abroad. It's good policy, and we need to keep doing it. Now, the AUMF is understandably outdated. If we want to fix it, a good way to do that would be simply take back Congress's role and pass a new one. Pass a new one that talks about the current threats, and that's Hezbollah, it's ISIS, it's the Taliban, it's Al-Qaeda, it's Al-Shabaab, it's Hamas. We just need to revamp it. Economy and the financial markets. It talks about quantitative easing in particular and the problems associated with that. Well, quantitative easing is just an unconventional monetary tool. It just means that we're buying more bonds so that we reduce the interest rates long term because the interest rates are already low. The real problem that we see with this is the debt that we're talking about. The debt is the problem, and it's mandatory spending that is the problem. The Congressional Budget Office tells us that discretionary spending right now and in the future will become the least, as proportionally the least amount in history out of our expenditures. Will continue to increase as healthcare expenditures and Social Security. That's what we need to tackle, and that takes actual courage. And we do that with Social Security plans that are based on more of a free market. Okay, I was watching you guys. I don't know. I'm Dan Crenshaw. Please vote for me. Thank you.
All right, so since I last sat down, I got 2 messages. Number 1, I need a volunteer to go start my car for me. Anyone? Any volunteers to go start my car? No? A lot of uneasy laughs in here, and I appreciate that. Number 2 is I forgot about the pot. I forgot about the marijuana question. I know a lot of you are very curious about that. 10th Amendment covers that. No reason to mention marijuana in any kind of federal registry or any kind of federal document. I want to talk about why we're running. I'm running for these 3 little girls right here. And our whole campaign is around this our values concept that I'm going to Washington, D.C. to fight for our mutual values of our faith and our family, our country, our jobs, and our recovery. You know, my wife right now, she's GCing a project for the last 5 months to rebuild our house from flooding. We understand what it's like when the government doesn't take care of you. It doesn't do their job. It doesn't prevent flooding. That allows people to illegally pollute the St. Jacinto River and flood your house. We understand incompetence. We understand how to fix it as well. Let me hit these questions right here. 4th Amendment. Yeah, you know, we saw the FISA memo about a week and a half ago. Wait till you see the 702 memo. This is insane, insane stuff. We have to have the congressmen enforce the 4th Amendment and make sure that that's legislated when necessary. The second part of the 4th is civil asset forfeiture. We have to end civil asset forfeiture. Number 2, foreign affairs and military engagements. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 says that Congress declares war. Congress has only declared war 5 times in our nation's history. The War of 1812, the Spanish-American War, the Mexican-American War, World War I, and World War II. That's it. That's it. Congress needs to rein in executive power and start declaring war whenever a war is actually being fought. Number 3, economy and financial markets. The Federal Reserve should not be artificially stimulating bank lending through quantitative easing. The spending in the national debt is insane. There's no reason why every single time a new child is born that child has their pro rata share of $70,000 in debt that they either have to pay or pass on to their heirs. It's ridiculous and it needs to stop. We don't have a tax problem. We have a spending problem. And when I get to D.C., we're going to fix that. This national security issue is something very, very intense. Because what a lot of the politicians in D.C. don't understand is that this is not primarily a military problem. This is not primarily a diplomatic problem. It's primarily an economic problem. Prosperity is national security. It's a fact. Whenever I'm in Washington, D.C., we're going to stop playing economic defense. It's time to go on economic offense. If you go to my website, rickwalker.com, you're going to see how we do that. I say that if God only requires us to give him 10%, the federal government should be able to require us to give him any more than 9%. I believe in a 9% flat tax. How do you like that? You like that? I say that if the world is trying to compete against us, let's compete right back against them. Let's let more than 85,000 H-1B visas, highly skilled, merit-based visas in the country. Let's expand it to 250,000. Let's suck the talent out of the rest of the world. Let's bring it here. Let's get that talent paying taxes here in America and starting small business here in America. That's called economic offense, and that's what we're going to do. You see, as a small businessman who also has the international experience, like someone who's in the White House right now, I understand what it takes to navigate the world, to create jobs, to create value from nothing. And I'm going to bring that skill set to Washington, D.C. But unlike certain people, I also have a moral compass. I'm a Baptist deacon. I run one of the largest global missionary organizations in the world. Well, we're on board of directors of the National Christian Foundation. I understand what it takes to live a wholesome, fully integrated life that's grounded in the moral compass of my faith. I am someone that you can trust. I am someone that's going to fight for you. It's very clear that I fought for you tonight. I fought for myself, and I'm fighting for my kids. You can trust me that I'm going to fight for you in Washington, D.C. I believe that this national debt and the spending have to stop. When I get to D.C., we're going to get rid of the Ex-Im Bank. We're going to get rid of the Department of Energy. We're going to reduce the Department of Education by 90%. and essentially make it into a grant-making organization. We're going to bring free enterprise markets back, and the family's coming back. Thanks so much. RickWalker.com.
So this topic is titled Congressional Power. It should be titled Congressional Weakness. Congress is the weakest branch. It's the forgotten branch. You've got the executive branch doing their job, you've got the judiciary doing their job, and you have Congress sitting it out. They haven't even gotten off the bus yet. That's the problems we're facing right now. The lack of will and the lack of character in Congress. That's what every single one of these questions get to. And that's what all the responses, that's the theme of all the responses. We need to get Congress back in the game. We need to get Congress strong and assertive. We need to get Congress to do their job. So number one, the FISA courts. I stand with Judge Poe on this. He's been fighting this much longer than 7 days ago on the FISA memo. He's been leading the fight on this. He knows this as a criminal court judge here in state court, what a real warrant looks like. So I stand with Judge Poe. I support his policies. I would continue those policies. The authorization for use of military force. Here's the problem with the military. I spent 5 years active duty, 3 years National Guard, deployed twice. I didn't work a day in 5 years. It was the most amazing experience. But to a hammer, everything is a nail. Everything is a nail. When you're a hammer, you want to hit that nail as hard as possible, and that's what's going on. Congress needs to assert their power and have oversight. We spent over $2 to $5 trillion in treasure and thousands of lives in all of these 14 countries. Maybe that's okay, but it would be nice to have a congressional debate and authorization for each fight. And maybe if we did that, we'd say, well, this one, not so much. But we don't have that fight. And that's Congress ceding authority, ceding power. And we need to stop that. The final issue is economics. This is a huge issue, and we're seeing it right now. A budget is a decision between this option or that option. That's what a budget is. We haven't made that decision in years, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it right now with the Senate proposal. It's going to add about $300 billion to the deficit. And what they're saying is, it's not this or that. You can have this and that. It's a snake oil salesman. You can have military spending increased. You can have non-military spending increased. And you can have this disaster recovery funding. You can have it all. It'll cost you nothing. There's no cuts. Yeah, exactly, your grandchildren. It'll cost your grandchildren. It'll cost my 3 daughters. And that's something that needs to be talked about. And that's something that Congress needs to assert itself and stop. That's the issue that we have facing us. Congressional power, we need a strong, assertive Congress. And I've shown through my record that I have the character necessary to make a strong and conservative Congress. Kept a promise to my fellow soldiers to never leave a fallen comrade in combat. I've kept a promise of marriage alive with my wife as we lead marriage preparation for engaged couples, helping over 300 couples prepare for marriage and family. Kept a promise of the First Amendment's religious freedom alive by defending churches' religious freedom in court. I will take that character and promise to Congress, and I will fight for you in Congress, and we will make Congress the strongest branch, the first branch like it is in the Constitution, and we will restore power to the people. Thank you very much.
I know what you're thinking. I hope he doesn't use all 5 minutes. Thank you all so much for being patient, being here tonight. I think these things are very important. It's very critical with 9 of us in the race. It's important that you get to know who we are and what we believe, why we're doing this. When I'm asked that, it's usually, why are you doing this? But I also want to talk about congressional powers. The powers are there for why? They're there to protect our freedoms. If the Constitution is the law of the land, the Declaration of Independence is the spirit. And if you look at the natural rights that were endowed to us by our Creator, it's that one phrase that's so important in the Declaration of Independence. When it talks of our rights, it then says, to secure our rights, governments are instituted by men, deriving their just powers by the consent of from the consent of the governed. That's really important. That's us. They are there for us, and not the other way around. And if you look at that, I'll skip down to number 2. Foreign affairs and military engagements. I don't think Congress is very interested in taking their war powers back, because if they have to make hard decisions, it's very difficult for them to get reelected. We have a lot of representatives in office, and that is an absolute shame. Whether I'm in for a term or 5, I'm going to do the right thing, just like I've done in hospitals that have been distressed. I go into facilities where I'm instantly not liked. That's the way Congress is going to be. It's a shark tank. You're going to have somebody who knows how to swim with sharks, but maintain their integrity and their values. And be able to do the right thing always, without question. But as it relates to the military engagements, Congress needs to assert those war powers and not abdicate them anymore. What you've heard tonight from all the different candidates is they're all right. The president has had the right, but Congress is not bringing that back in. But as far as our Fourth Amendment rights, there was a Freedom Caucus going back to those guys. I would say 2 weeks ago, they fought and clawed and bled to not have the FISA rulings reintroduced, and Congress passed it. They just overlooked what they were saying in that law, or in that proposal. But here we are after all this drama, and it's an issue. Our rights are not being protected by our representatives, and that's not okay. We need to hold them accountable. Accountability is not a dirty word. I know that it's not looked upon very highly these days, but we need to do more about it. Economy and financial markets. Really, there's 3 things going on in that section. 1, we're dealing with the Fed, the national debt, and the deficit. As far as the Fed is concerned, we need to audit the Fed. There's not a lot of disclosure. There's not transparency, and there needs to be a full disclosure of what's going on in that organization. And as Johnny was discussing just a moment ago, the federal spending budget that is in process tonight, Rand Paul was on the floor of the Senate this evening, as impassioned as he could possibly be, to talk about how to stop this process, because they've thrown everything into this bill, including the kitchen sink. And if it gets voted in as it stands, Malcolm mentioned earlier that we had a $509 billion deficit this year, or this past year. If it stands, this year's will be over $700 billion, and 2019's will be over $1 trillion. The deficit. It's not sustainable. There is a breaking point. We've got to end the madness. There are things that we can do, that we can shave from the existing budget to pay for the things that we need to pay for. We need to fund our military. We need to protect our sons and our daughters. We don't need them to be underprepared and ill-equipped. But we send inordinate amounts of money to different countries that hate us, that burn our flag, that desecrate everything that is American. And that just shouldn't be. And as far as the national debt, $20 trillion, it's nearly exceeding our overall economy. That is an exorbitant number. And we need people that are willing to make those decisions, the this and the that, and not the both and the and. And that's something that we can absolutely do. Thank you. Please go to my website, davidbalat.com.
All right, thank you all very much. How about this crop of candidates? Don't we have some great candidates? So, one of the benefits of having less than 9 candidates here tonight is that we have a little bit of time left over. So, if it's okay with everyone else, we're going to implement a bonus round. We've decided to allow the candidates 1 extra minute to talk about an issue that is most important to them. And we're going to start in the order of the introduction, so we're going to give it to Dr. Spiers. So, just 1 minute, and then we'll wrap it up.
Finally, I might get to talk about health care. Said earlier, I'm Dr. Jon Spiers. I began my professional life as a heart surgeon, and that is my passion. I wish I could still be operating today, but an injury made me choose another career. I chose one where I felt I could continue to help people and patients, so I became a healthcare attorney. That combination gave me the opportunity to understand many of the challenges that we all face, and when I was injured, I got to be a patient, and I realized that's really not any fun at all. Our healthcare system is too complex. My colleagues have talked about transparency. That is essential. We need to understand the real value in our healthcare. We do not have a mechanism to do that. We need to reform our medication expenditures. We spend far too much. No one should go to the pharmacy to pick up their medicines and discover they have a $5,000 bill that's not covered by insurance. We need to quit what's called sticky pricing. If someone raises their price in healthcare, rather than competition driving prices down, everyone else just raises theirs. A CT scan today shouldn't cost more than it did 10 years ago when it hasn't changed at all. I want to reform healthcare. That's my #1 priority. I'm Dr. Jon Spiers, drjonspiers.com. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rick Walker. Can I say my name again? Anyone's heard my radio commercial? We say my name 13 times. Wow. People ask why didn't I voice it over? I took Malcolm's advice. You can't refer to yourself in the third person, so I hired a voiceover guy to say my name 13 times in 60 seconds. So, and I just wasted 30 seconds for that. I want to remind you of the words of Frederic Bastiat, who said, "The purpose of the law is to defend persons, liberty, and property." And the whole function of the law in government is so that justice might reign over all. It's the job of the government to do those 3 things: protect persons, protect liberty, and protect property. That's it. The government's too big, we're going to rein it in. I'm going to Washington, D.C. to fight for our values, for our faith, our country, our family, our jobs, and our recovery. Let's do this together. Thanks a lot.
Yes, most important to me, as I said before, healthcare. And with all due respect, I'm going to share a little bit, not meaning to point at you, Justin, is Dr. Jon as well. Transparency, selling insurance across state lines, these are Republican talking points. They're actually absolutely meaningless to fixing healthcare. Transparent, I'll tell you how it actually works. Ever wonder why it costs $10,000 for a CAT scan? It's because it's illegal for me to have my rates below Medicare. And I've got to, as a fiduciary, set my rates higher than either the charge or the allowable by an insurance company. Our charges are meaningless. We all know it. They're fictitious numbers. Nobody expects to collect those dollars. We need to get rid of certain regulations that allows us to have multiple price lists. And only then can we offer pricing at an affordable rate. In one of my hospitals, I had to go through an arduous process to offer CAT scans. I had a cash price for CAT scans at $250, and I made a profit at it. That's what we've done locally. That's what we can do nationally. And I'd love your support and your vote. My name is David Balat. Thank you.
Did you get it? Oh, all right. So I think I said this, but when I went to candidate school, and I think the other candidates have picked up on this, they said, mention your name a lot because that's the only thing anybody remembers about you. So I'm Malcolm Whittaker, and my big thing is the federal deficit. We are $20 trillion in debt. It's a national security issue. It is endangering the security of us. That is $70,000. And I pledge to you that if, and I hope when you send me to Washington, D.C., that's, as I said, $70,000 per person, man, woman, and child. So I hope that if and when you send me to Washington, you'll give me the opportunity to work on that and to reduce the federal deficit. And as I told you, I have a competition on my website with the monthly prize of a Ruger AR 5.56 semi-automatic rifle. And is Mr. Beals here? He actually won the January competition. I was hoping he was going to be here so I could shake his hand. I'm Malcolm Whittaker, and my website's www.notagovernmentman.com. Thank you.
Jonny Havens here again. Character counts. That's what this race is about. That's what we need in Congress is character. We need to have the will to do the right thing, the will to follow through on the promises we make. One big issue that we need to talk about is President Trump's jobs agenda. The way to get jobs is to get the government out of the way. President Trump and the executive branch are doing a good job. He announced cutting 2 regulations for every one. He's achieved 22-1. Great job for the executive branch. The judiciary is sitting on the sideline. They have a judge-made doctrine that says, I defer to the agency's interpretation of the law or the regulation. That's terrible. We can overturn that legislatively. And finally, there's Congress. We've talked about the weakness in Congress. We've talked about the lack of oversight. We've talked about the lack of will. We need character in Congress. We need character to count again. Support me, and we'll make that happen. Jonny Havens for Congress. Thank you all very much.
My name is Dan Crenshaw. A long time ago, I took an oath to defend the Constitution. And that wasn't just from foreign enemies abroad. It was from overtaxation and overregulation and federal overreach. It was defending our borders. It was defending our Christian values. But we all say we're going to do that. And if you think that as a second district you only deserve 1 vote out of 435 in the U.S. House of Representatives, then it doesn't matter which one of us you vote for because we'll all vote probably the same. But if you believe, and if you can imagine having a leader who knows what it means to inspire and show passion and lead, then I'd appreciate your support. And if you can imagine someone who can bring forth the next generation to endorse conservative values again, then I'd appreciate your support. And if you can imagine someone with the recent and relevant experience to keep Americans safe and secure our border, then I'd love to have your support. Because I will be a lion for you, I will be a champion for the conservative movement, and I will never quit on Texas. Thank you.
It's hard just to pick one, right? The question was, what is the one thing top of your mind? I'm a business guy. I'm an economics guy. There's a lot of things I want to change. The tax system, the border, immigration. But nothing ever seems to happen. We're missing that catalyst to get something done. It comes back to one idea. People in Washington have been there for too long. 88 people have been there for over 20 years. We need term limits. When we have a term limit, things will get done. That will be the catalyst. Because right now, the people in Congress, they have a clock. And that clock ticks above their head, not like at this table. And that clock says number of years they've been in office. So if something doesn't get done today, they kick the can down the road and say, maybe next year, maybe not, I don't care. Let's turn that clock upside down. Let's have that clock tick backwards. Days remaining in office, not years gone. We turn that clock, things get done. That's how we'll fix our economy. I'm Justin Lurie, I'm running for Congress.
Thank you, thank you. How about a big hand? These are a fantastic group of candidates you have. And you are a fantastic audience. I've never been in such a well-behaved group, yet attentive is fantastic. Thanks to Vlad, handling all our video, audio, and Ben McFall. Who am I leaving out? Bob Hall helped set up. It's been a team effort. We had 3 groups coming together. It's been great working with these guys, and it's been great doing this forum for you all. So I hope you liked it. Runoff. Oh, yeah. One last question. When you're in the runoff, would you come back for another one of these? Yeah, all right. All right, with that, thank you very much. Have a good evening. Drive safely. And tell everyone to come out and vote. Tell them what you heard here tonight. Spread the word.